My name is David Carter. I am 40 years old, and if there's one thing I've learned in this life, it's that time can take everything from you in the blink of an eye and still expect you to get up and keep going. 8 years ago, I lost the love of my life, my first wife, Julia. She was my anchor, my balance, my home, and when a sudden illness took her from me, it felt like the universe had pulled the ground out from under my feet. I was 32 at the time, too young to be a widower, too stubborn to admit how broken I was, so I did the only thing I knew how to do. I buried myself in work. I had already started building my company, a logistics and distribution firm that I founded from scratch, but after Julia's death, it became more than just a business. It became a tribute to her memory, the thing that kept me alive, and for years I worked late nights, weekends, holidays, anything to fill the silence in my home. People called me a machine, a man obsessed with profit and growth, but the truth is, I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing distraction. I was chasing numbness. I was chasing a way to not feel the empty side of the bed every morning. By the time I was 35, the company had grown tenfold, and I was respected in my industry, though personally, I was still hollow. That was when my best friend Richard came to me one evening with what seemed like a small favor. We had known each other since college. He had been by my side during my hardest times, and when he asked me to consider giving a job to a young woman he knew, I didn't think twice. Her name was Clara. She was 28 at the time, struggling financially after her family collapsed under debts, and Richard told me she was bright, hardworking, and in desperate need of a chance. He said she had a background in accounts management but lacked the connections to get into a serious company. Out of respect for him, I agreed to meet her, and when Clara walked into my office for the interview, I'll admit I was struck by her poise. She wasn't flashy, she didn't try to oversell herself, but she spoke with precision. Her knowledge of numbers and systems was undeniable, and her confidence in breaking down complex reports impressed me. I gave her a position as my personal assistant, thinking at most she'd handle scheduling, some reports, and ease my workload, but Clara proved herself invaluable in ways I didn't expect. Within months, she uncovered a series of accounting discrepancies in a project that could have cost the company millions. I remember sitting across from her in the boardroom as she laid out spreadsheets and audit trails, calmly pointing out where a subcontractor had padded invoices. If she hadn't caught it, I would have signed off, and the losses would have been devastating. That was the first time I truly looked at her not just as an assistant, but as someone I could trust. From there, our working relationship grew. Clara worked tirelessly, often staying late without being asked, keeping my schedule flawless, and even reminding me to eat when I would otherwise forget. Slowly, she filled spaces in my life I didn't realize were still empty. She didn't push, she didn't pry, but she had a way of being present, steady, almost like she had studied the rhythm of my grief and found ways to make it more bearable. By the time I turned 37, I found myself smiling again, something I hadn't done naturally in years. Against everything I once promised myself, I began to care for her. It started small, dinners after late nights at the office, long conversations in the quiet when the world had gone home, and before I knew it, I couldn't imagine the company or my life without her. 3 years ago, I did something I swore I would never do again after Julia's death. I got married. Clara became my wife, and for a time, I believed I had been given a second chance at happiness. Our wedding was simple, private, nothing extravagant, but it meant something to me. To everyone else, it looked like the perfect story, a man who rebuilt his life, found love again, and continued to grow his empire. And for a while, I believed it too. The company reached new heights with Clara by my side. She proved again and again her sharp mind for accounts and management, and I thought fate had finally shown me mercy. But life has a cruel way of testing whether you've truly healed, and mine came in the form of a car accident that changed everything. It was a rainy evening, one of those long nights after a board meeting, when my driver took a turn on a slick road, and before I knew it, metal crumpled, glass shattered, and everything went black. When I woke up, I wasn't really awake. Doctors later told me I had been in a coma-like state for 15 days, a limbo where my body was alive, but my mind was adrift. When I finally clawed my way back to consciousness, it wasn't like flipping a switch. My eyes barely opened, my body was heavy, and speaking was almost impossible. But my hearing worked just fine. And the first thing I truly processed wasn't the beeping machines or the sterile hospital air. It was my wife's voice. Clara was sitting at my bedside, but she wasn't whispering words of comfort or prayers for my recovery. She was speaking to a lawyer. My lawyer. And what I heard made my blood run cold. The power of attorney will need to be pushed through quickly, she said, her tone calm, almost rehearsed. If David doesn't regain full capacity, I need control of his shares, his company, his assets. It's what he would want, to make sure things don't fall apart. The lawyer murmured something I couldn't catch, but her reply was sharper, firmer. No, it has to be now. The board is already circling, and I can't have them questioning my authority. Lying there, trapped in my own body, I felt a kind of helplessness I had never known before. The woman I had trusted, the woman I had married, the woman I believed had saved me, was orchestrating my financial deathbed. I forced myself to remain still, to keep my breath shallow, my eyes half-lidded, because I needed to know more. I needed to be certain before I acted. For the next hours, I listened, piecing together fragments of her conversations, each one confirming the same thing. Clara was preparing to take everything. But then something happened I couldn't have predicted. A nurse, one I hadn't seen before, entered quietly to check my vitals. She looked at me, really looked, and for a moment our eyes locked. She saw what Clara didn't, that behind my sluggish movements, behind my stillness, I was aware. She left for just an hour, and when she came back, she was holding an envelope that would change everything. She leaned closer as she adjusted the pillow, her voice a whisper only I could hear. "Read it if you can," she said, slipping a plain envelope beneath the sheet by my side. My heart pounded as Clara stepped out for a call, and with trembling fingers, I managed to slide the envelope open. Inside were documents, copies of forms with my forged signature, transfer requests, and at the bottom of one page, a note scribbled in hurried handwriting. "She's not working alone. Trust no one." I closed my eyes again, hiding the evidence beneath me as Clara returned, smiling faintly at the lawyer as though the room was already hers. In that moment, I understood two things. I was no longer just a patient fighting to recover. I was a man in the middle of a war I hadn't known was being waged against me. And if I wanted to survive it, I would have to play weaker than I was, gather proof, and wait for the right moment to strike. In the days that followed, I lay in that hospital bed with my eyes half shut and my breath shallow, carefully performing the role of a man still too weak to comprehend the world around him, while inside my mind I sharpened every memory, every word, and every small gesture I caught from Clara. To the doctors and nurses who weren't watching closely, I was improving but still fragile, a man recovering from a coma. But to me it felt like living inside a cage where the only weapon I had was patience. Clara visited often, always polished, her clothes immaculate, her smile convincing to anyone who didn't know what I had heard. She would sit by my bed, sometimes holding my hand, murmuring how strong I was, how proud she was of me. But the moment she stepped outside with the lawyer or took a call, her tone shifted. I caught phrases like documents to be signed, board members ready to align, and no one suspects. Every word was a blade in my chest, but I swallowed the pain, because I knew now that she wasn't just acting alone. The nurse's note haunted me. She's not working alone. Who else was behind this? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. On the fourth day after I first woke, Clara's phone buzzed while she had stepped out, and though my body still felt like lead, my ears were sharper than ever. She answered just outside the door, her voice hushed but distinct. "He's stable," she said. "But don't worry, he's still not able to move much. The lawyer says the paperwork should be finalized by Friday. Once it's done, the shares are ours." "Yes, Richard, I know what's at stake. Don't call me during visiting hours again." Richard, my best friend, the man who had introduced me to Clara. My mind reeled, but suddenly everything made sense. The way she had appeared in my life, the way he had vouched for her, the way she had slid so seamlessly into my company and then into my personal life. It wasn't fate or chance. It was a plan years in the making. Rage flared in me, but I buried it, because showing it now would mean losing everything. That night, when Clara finally left, the nurse returned, the same one who had slipped me the envelope. She moved quickly, closing the curtain around my bed as she adjusted the four. Her name badge read Evelyn. She leaned close and whispered, "I've seen this before, Mr. Carter. Families torn apart by greed. I knew you were aware when I caught your eyes open." I gave you what I could, but you need to decide what comes next. Do you want me to help you? Or do you want to go through the hospital channels? I forced my lips to part, the words barely audible, but enough. Help me. Evelyn nodded, her face set with determination. Then you need allies you can trust. Not here, not in your home, not in your office. Do you have anyone outside this? My mind raced. Most of my circle was tied to either the company or Richard, and Clara had likely poisoned those waters already. But there was one, my cousin, Daniel, a quiet man who had never been involved in the business, a schoolteacher who lived 2 towns over. He had no stake, no ambition, just loyalty to family. With trembling fingers, I scratched Daniel's name onto a pad Evelyn brought, and she nodded, slipping it into her pocket. I'll reach him. The next 48 hours were agony. Pretending to be weaker than I was while listening to Clara and Richard plot my downfall just feet away from me. They spoke of timelines, board votes, liquidating certain assets, even moving me to a private facility once the power of attorney was secured so they could control my care as well. Each word was a noose tightening around my neck. But Evelyn kept her word. Late one evening, when visiting hours were long over, she returned with a small, battered notebook, whispering, "Your cousin came. He's on your side. He said to tell you he'll follow your instructions." My chest ached with relief. For the first time since the accident, I felt a sliver of hope. I whispered back, halting, forcing each word out, "Tell Daniel, shadow her, find proof." Evelyn scribbled it down and slipped away. From that point forward, the hospital became both a stage and a prison. Clara continued her performance as the grieving, devoted wife, but the mask would slip when she thought I was unconscious. She laughed with Richard over the phone, joked about how easy it was to fool the staff, and even mocked me, saying, "He was always too trusting." It's almost pathetic. Hearing her words was like salt in an open wound, but I used the pain to fuel my resolve. Meanwhile, Evelyn and Daniel worked quietly in the shadows. Daniel began following Clara when she left the hospital, keeping records of where she went, who she met. Within a week, Evelyn smuggled me another envelope. Inside were photographs, Clara dining with Richard at a private club, Clara meeting with board members behind my back, Clara signing papers with a lawyer not affiliated with the company. The betrayal was deeper than I imagined. Richard wasn't just helping her. He was the architect. He had placed her in my life, groomed her to gain my trust, and together they were dismantling everything I had built. The evidence ignited a fire in me. My body was still weak, but my mind sharpened like steel. I began working on my recovery in secret, forcing my muscles to respond when no one was looking. Small movements at first, a finger twitch, a toe curling under the sheet. But every day, I pushed harder. Evelyn coached me, urging me on quietly, covering for me when staff questioned the sudden changes in my vitals. "They can't know you're improving too quickly," she whispered. "Let them think you're still fragile. The longer they underestimate you, the better your chances." And so I endured, waiting, listening, gathering strength as Daniel's reports grew more damning. Clara and Richard were siphoning company funds into shell accounts, preparing to seize control the moment the paperwork cleared. They weren't just stealing my company, they were gutting it, preparing to strip it bare and leave me with nothing. One night, as Clara leaned over me, her perfume sharp in my nose, she whispered, "Don't worry, darling. I'll take care of everything. You just focus on resting." Her lips brushed my forehead, but all I felt was ice. Because I knew the truth now. Every kiss, every smile, every kind word had been part of a performance leading to this moment. And as she sat back, checking her phone, I made myself a silent vow. I would not be her victim. I would not be Richard's pawn. They thought they had written the final act of my story, but they had underestimated me. And when the time came, I would show them that David Carter was not a man so easily destroyed. The day of reckoning began like any other, with Clara sweeping into my hospital room in her tailored dress, a folder clutched in her hand, her eyes scanning me with a mix of feigned tenderness and cold calculation. And though she smiled sweetly and called me darling, I noticed the impatience in her movements, the quick glances at the clock, the way her hand trembled slightly as she adjusted the sheets. Today was different. Today the lawyer would be bringing the final power of attorney papers for me to sign, and she had no idea that while she had been plotting my downfall, I had been quietly preparing my counterstrike. Thanks to Evelyn's loyalty and Daniel's tireless digging, I now had photographs, financial records, transcripts of calls, and sworn statements, all pointing directly at Clara and Richard's betrayal. But what I needed most was timing, to let them believe they had won until the very moment the ground gave way beneath their feet. Evelyn had arranged for Daniel to meet with a trusted prosecutor she knew, a man untainted by Richard's influence, and together they had crafted the legal trap. All I had to do was keep playing my part until the door swung open at just the right moment. Clara sat by my bed, stroking my hand as if she were the devoted wife, whispering, "You're doing so well, love. Just one more step, and everything will be settled." While I stared at her with blank, half-lidded eyes, pretending to be the broken man she thought I was, when inside I burned with anticipation, knowing that every word she spoke now was one more nail in her coffin. The lawyer arrived just after noon, a heavy-set man with silver hair and a briefcase, his eyes darting nervously as Clara greeted him. They thought they were here to witness the final act of my surrender, but what they didn't know was that Daniel and the prosecutor were already waiting in an adjacent room with detectives ready to act. Clara leaned close, her perfume suffocating, and whispered, "Don't worry, darling. I'll guide your hand if you're too weak." Her voice a mix of condescension and triumph. And for a brief second, I almost laughed at the audacity of her lie. But instead, I let my head loll to the side, feigning exhaustion, until the lawyer placed the documents on the table beside me. Evelyn entered then, her face calm, her hands steady as she pretended to adjust my fore, but I caught the faintest glimmer in her eyes, the signal that everything was ready. Clara took the pen, her hand hovering just above mine, and whispered, "Here we go, love. Just a signature and you can rest easy." But before she could guide the pen to paper, I tightened my fingers around it with a strength that shocked her. Her eyes widened as I slowly lifted my head, my voice hoarse but clear enough to cut through the silence. "You want my signature, Clara? Then let's make sure the right people witness it." Her face drained of color. The lawyer froze mid-step, and before she could recover, the door burst open and in walked Daniel, the prosecutor, and two detectives with badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The room erupted into chaos, Clara stammering, Richard barging in moments later with a look of horror as he realized the trap, the lawyer fumbling with his papers. But I sat up, my body trembling yet unyielding, and stared directly at the two people who had tried to destroy me. For years, I rasped, my voice gaining strength with each word. "I trusted you both. I gave you my loyalty, my friendship, my love. And this is how you repay me? By plotting to steal everything I built, everything I bled for? Did you really think I wouldn't see through it?" Clara lunged toward me, her mask crumbling, tears spilling down her face as she wailed, "David, no. You don't understand. I did it for us." But the detectives stepped between us, their hands firm on her shoulders, while Richard, pale and shaking, muttered excuses. "It was business, David. Nothing personal. You were too blind to see what was happening in your own company." And I felt a dark satisfaction settle in my chest. The prosecutor opened a folder, laying out the evidence Daniel had collected: offshore accounts in Clara's name, transfers authorized by Richard, meeting transcripts where they discussed replacing me, photographs of their clandestine meetings, and even recordings Evelyn had helped secure from Clara's calls in the hospital corridor. The weight of their scheme lay bare for all to see, and the lawyer who had come with them sank into a chair, his head in his hands, realizing he had been drawn into a criminal conspiracy far larger than he understood. Clara's sobs turned shrill, desperate, as she tried to twist free from the detective's grip, screaming, "He was nothing without me. I saved him. I was the one who kept this company alive." But her words fell hollow, every lie exposed, every manipulation undone. Richard's facade of control shattered completely when the prosecutor announced the charges: fraud, conspiracy, attempted theft, and more, his knees buckling as he realized his empire of deceit had crumbled in an instant. I watched them both being led away, their faces etched with disbelief and rage, and for the first time since the accident, I felt the crushing weight on my chest lift. Evelyn stood by my side, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her voice soft but firm as she said, "It's over, Mr. Carter. They can't hurt you anymore." But I shook my head, my eyes still locked on Clara as she was dragged from the room. "No, I whispered. It's only the beginning. Because I knew the real work lay ahead, rebuilding my company, reclaiming my life, and ensuring that no one could ever again turn my trust into a weapon against me. And as the door slammed shut behind them, I made myself another vow. The man who had gone into that coma was gone. The man who rose from this bed would be harder, sharper, and far less forgiving. And that, my friends, was the end of Clara and Richard's game. Justice had its day, but I want to turn this moment over to you. What do you think? Did I make the right choice in letting the law handle them? Or should I have gone further after everything they did to me? If you were in my place, lying in that hospital bed, hearing your own wife plot your downfall with your best friend, what would you have done? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below in the comments. Your perspective matters, and I read every word you share. And if you enjoyed this story, if it made you think, if it made you question loyalty, betrayal, and revenge, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because there are many more stories like this one still to come. Until next time, stay sharp, stay watchful, and remember, trust is a gift, and once broken, it can never be the same again.